Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rosen Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunello Rosa. This week, we're changing track a little bit from our usual talk of market and geopolitics to touch on an ever important issue of climate change, and specifically the ongoing battle between climate change activists and negationists. Uh, in the last few weeks, we've seen quite a few number of extreme climate-related episodes, and for whatever reason, it only seems like we see more and more of these. Brunello, could you point out some of the key ones over the last few months?
Well, there have been several. If we want to start with what happened in New York, that was engulfed by the smoke from the wildlife fires in Canada. So the winds managed to bring all the smoke back to New York. Just to give you an idea, we saw those pictures where New York is all in orange and red. It's kind of unusual. But that wasn't the only case of wildfire that have erupted recently. We had in the islands of Corfu and Rhodes in Greece, of course, but also in the Italian island of Sicily, and other episodes in Portugal and in Dubrovnik in Croatia. So this is just very, very recent examples. What we know is that temperatures have risen to 48 degrees Celsius, and the temperature of the oceans have reached its highest level on record, 21 degrees on average over the planet, which is super, super high. These are all phenomena related to global warming. Global warming has caused severe droughts in California for years, for example, where lots of areas of California have become desertic. But guess what? Exactly because of global warming and these extreme weather conditions, we had the opposite event. We had snow in Sierra Nevada, which didn't happen for several years, and instead, during this winter, we had heavy snow in Sierra Nevada. So clearly, these are not isolated episodes. We have extreme high temperature in some parts of the planet, but then we had, conversely, floods and water-related problems in other parts of the planet. Most recently, floods in Italy, floods in Austria, floods in Slovenia, but we've seen Pakistan, and even, as I said, snow in the Dolomites in August. So clearly, this is not kind of the normality, what we consider normality. In fact, there have been several studies that show that these phenomena are all linked to global warming, leading to climate change. And this phenomenon has been going on for many, many years, at least the last 30 to 50 years.
Absolutely. And I mean, we all know there's a very large body of science behind it, which can be, a bit tedious for our listeners to wade through. What are the biggest studies, backing the sort of human caused nature of some of these climate emergencies? What should we watch out for?
So as you said, there's a plethora of studies showing that the average temperature have risen massively in the last few decades. Just to give an idea, NASA have shown that the average temperature has risen by 1 degree in the last 30 to 40 years. There's a study by Cornell University that shows that 99.9 of the more than 88,000 climate change studies agree that global warming is caused by human activity and the burning of fossil fuels. This is the so-called anthropogenic theory of global warming. And there will be more studies going forward showing exactly the same thing. So at some point, one can think, oh, that must be kind of now common sense, common knowledge. That's exactly what's going on. But in reality, we know that there are opposite points of views that are emerging.
Absolutely, and that's something I wanted to just talk further about. Is we know, perhaps from social media, perhaps just by glancing at the news, that there is very much a force opposing all of this research. A large group of people that say that are effectively the negationist camp that say that either that climate change is not happening or that maybe it is happening, but that it's a very natural phenomenon that's unconnected to the consequence of the Industrial Revolution and human activity. Could you sort of summarize what the views of this sort of negationist camp are, and possibly as well how credible they may or may not be?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had people that didn't believe in the theory. If anything, the global warming / climate change theory has become mainstream only in the last decade or so. And still today, there's widespread resistance in agreeing to the fact that climate change is, in fact, an important phenomenon to take care of. But here we are not talking about those who have been hard to convince, or we had in the past, for example, even the unions that were fearing that interventions to save climate meant closing factories, which means losing jobs. And so there were this kind of early stage opposers of the theory of climate change because they were fearing that their own core interests would be put in danger. But we are not talking about those. In fact, in recent years, those people have been highly sensitive to the phenomenon, have been convinced, and have been incentivized because governments have started to deploy industrial policies towards green production and green energy and so on. So in fact, people have understood there's plenty of jobs that can be created in this environmentally friendly industry. What we are talking about here is those people who totally deny the problem in spite of all the evidence in front of them. People who say, oh, it's hot in summer, what's new about that? Recently, they've organized themselves in various organizations. The most important of them is probably CLINTEL, Climate Intelligence Foundation, which has been formed by some academics or former academics in the Netherlands. And those people have put together a World Climate Declaration, whose motto is, there is no climate emergency. So this is a new form of skepticals. And I would say at this point, negationists. So people that actually say, there's no problem at all to worry about. And now the question is, the environmentalists have become mainstream. And, the Greenpeace of the world, the WWF, even the Fridays for Future, Last Generation, you name it. These people are now fighting a battle that more or less governments have weathered. However, as soon as an opposing camp emerges, then guess what? They will be able to, express an opposite view to the mainstream that will definitely slow down all the process that is needed to stop the activities that cause global warming. This is not a new phenomenon. During the pandemic, there were the anti-vaxxers, those who thought that the entire pandemic was a huge conspiracy theory engineered by the multinationals or the pharmaceuticals. They wanted just to sell the vaccines and stuff like that. Even for more basic common knowledge, so to speak, such as the evolutionist theory about human beings and how human beings came on Earth, starting from the waters of many millennia ago, and then evolving into reptiles, and then evolving into apes, and then evolving into human beings, the so-called evolutionist. This is kind of broadly accepted theory. But guess what? In Texas, both the creationist theory, which means there's a subject that has created Earth one day from another, is taught in public schools as a viable alternative to the scientific theory of evolutionism. And that is now accepted. And so as long as you find a political party that is willing to support those theories, and those political parties tend to be to the right-hand side of the political spectrum, and there are many, and those views are supported by strong interest groups, clearly all those linked to the fossil fuel industry might be among them. Well, you will see that instead of having a mainstream that fights a fringe movement, you will probably see now a battle between two equally strong movements, even if one is really not supported by scientific evidence, which in fact is totally in favor. As we said, 99.9% of the studies show that. But the fact that this second camp is in place, it might be supported by strong, powerful, and rich industries, and supported by some parties. You will see how this battle for the environmentalists will become much harder in the future. And we will probably lose some very vital time when we don't have much more time left.
Yeah. But no, I think as you highlighted yourself there, it's really nothing original in its own sense. Kind of with any big mobilization of the public interest for a social goal, there's always some sort of a negationist factor. It's really about how much credence and sort of how much influence that negationist faction gains based on its political leanings, based on the backing of private donors and organizations in the fossil fuels industry, that sort of determines how effective they are in their mission. So certainly that'll be one to watch for the many years to come, because it really does define the future. It is very much an existential risk more than anything. But as always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much. Until next time.